Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us in this webinar about prototyping for food delivery apps. I hope everyone has brought their appetite because today we are serving delicious prototyping experiences, and a lot of more food and design related puns are coming. Please go to the chat and let us know from where you're joining us today. Please let us know from where you're joining us. Hi, Mike. Hi, Miguel from Spain. Charles from Malaysia. Mike from Latvia. Rudolph. Hello. Hello, Berlin. Hello, Paris. Hi, Italy. Hi, Red from the Philippines. Hi, Arthur. Okay, while everyone is kind of joining in, let's get started because today's webinar is packed. So yeah, we can't lose any second. For those of you who are new, my name is Julia, and I will be your host today in today's webinar. So let's meet today's speakers, shall we? Allow me to introduce you to my esteemed colleague, Rebecca Caritas, Customer Success Manager at ProtoPie, who will give you a brief yet insightful introduction to the world of ProtoPie. Rebecca, would you like to say hi to our audience?
Yeah, sure. Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here today as a speaker too.
Thank you, Rebecca. Today's session features Wolt, the acclaimed Finnish delivery platform, celebrated for its food and merchandise services. It is my honor to introduce you to Samu Rintala, the talented motion designer at Wolt. Samu will be your expert guide throughout this flavorful prototyping journey today. Samu, please say hi to our audience today.
Hey, hello. Nice to meet you all, and very excited and nervous about this presentation, but hopefully you'll enjoy it.
Of course, no need to be nervous at all. Okay, then let's go over today's menu, today's specials. For appetizers, we have prepared a brief introduction to ProtoPie, like I mentioned just now. Our main course will be Samu's presentation. Samu will take us on a deep dive in prototyping for food delivery apps at Wolt. We then invite all of you for a portion of dessert with a Q&A session at the end. I encourage all of you to participate actively in today's webinar to make sure that we make the most of it. So please use the Q&A feature of Zoom to ask any questions you might have, and we will cover them at the end. Okay, then without further ado, let's get started.
Okay, thank you, Julia. Well, I will start today introducing ProtoPie. First of all, as most of you may know, ProtoPie is a high-fidelity prototyping tool that allows designers to create really advanced prototypes, and also it helps them actually to communicate their ideas to other stakeholders. So, however, ProtoPie is not only that. ProtoPie is not only a software, ProtoPie is also an ecosystem. So let me explain you why. In ProtoPie, we actually have ProtoPie Studio, which is where all the magic begins. There, you can actually import all your designs from your favorite tools and start prototyping right away. Then we also have the ProtoPie Player, where you can fully interact with your prototypes on your real devices. And also we have ProtoPie Connect, which allows you to integrate with hardware devices and also APIs. If you think actually that we left collaboration on the side, I think you're wrong, because we also have ProtoPie Cloud. In ProtoPie Cloud, you can store and you can also share your prototypes safely, because we have also the password protection. And not only that, but it allows you also to conduct user testing, and you can also create developers handoffs. So let me explain you a bit of our conceptual model. Actually, in ProtoPie, we believe that interactions can be created only using these three components: object, trigger, and response. So for example, here, if you pull the trigger of the cloud, then the response that will occur is that the cloud will turn on. So it pretty much works as the if this, then that format, and it's pretty simple. And if you see this image here, that kind of looks like a periodic table, it actually shows all the triggers and responses that we have in ProtoPie Studio. On the left, you can find all the triggers, and on the right, you can find all the responses. So by combining these two and assigning them to objects, you can actually create really amazing interactions. And the result will be this type of prototypes that actually look like the end product. And if you're actually not sure yet of what you can do with ProtoPie and you would like to know whether it fits in your workflow, or you want to know if it can do certain interactions, then you can reach out to us anytime, and we will be very happy to show you a demo and to show you all the possibilities that you have with ProtoPie. Then I'll be it. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Okay, then let's kick off Samu's presentation. Samu, the stage is yours. We look forward to hearing everything about how you guys use ProtoPie to deliver delicious experiences at Wolt. The stage is yours. I'll stop my share.
All right, thank you. Let's see, and hopefully you will see my screen now.
We can see it, I confirm.
I'll take the zoom out there, so hopefully that's not visible anymore. All right, so thank you, and once again, hello everybody, and good morning, evening, afternoon, night, whatever time you have, wherever you are in the world. But hey, really nice that you joined. But let's get going, and I'll tell you a little story about Wolt, motion, and ProtoPie. So let's start. So I am Samu Rintala. As said before, I'm a motion designer at Wolt, but I have almost like 10 years of history with motion, even though I've been at Wolt for only a year now. But I used to work in like motion graphics in advertising, that kind of stuff. I'm from Finland. I have a family of 4 here, a wife and 2 kids and a silly dog. And I'm very, very happy and excited to be here today talking to you all. I'm very nervous, and you can probably tell. That's about me. And today's menu we have, I'm going to explain you a little bit about Wolt, what it is, if you're not familiar with it, and our design team, and how motion works with our design team and rest of the company, and how do we work with engineers and designers. And then as a dessert, the ProtoPie, the actual issue of today's presentation. So then we get to that, and then I'll briefly explain how we plan to use ProtoPie in the future as well. All right, but let's start. So Wolt, what are we? We're a delivery platform for food, groceries, and retail items. Basically, our mission is to bring the city into your phone and from there to your door. And we were founded in Helsinki, Finland in 2014, so almost 10 years old now. And together with our parent company DoorDash, we operate in 29 countries, and we just opened 2 new countries this month. Yeah, but let's check a little bit about our design team. So our design team is spread across these 6 major groups. So the consumer-facing app, of course, being the most big one, and then we have app for merchants, couriers, and Wolt Market is our own grocery chain where we do a lot of internal tooling and that kind of stuff. And support is our pride and joy, basically, of our company. So we support them with design a lot as well. And then we have B2B, where we have this kind of a delivery as a service kind of Wolt Drive, and then Wolt for Work, which is this kind of lunch benefit that a company can offer their employees. And there's about 40 of us currently. We have product designers, content designers, UX writers, localization, benchmarking, user research, and motion designers. We're dedicated to, or some of us are dedicated to the different groups I presented earlier. And mostly they are product designers, and we have a central design as well, which hosts most of these people who are under the product designer title there. And our motion team, there's two of us, me and Masha. She's been here for a bit longer time, and she has done a very good job of like paving way for motion in the company, and nowadays it's really appreciated, and it's really nice to work with motion at Wolt currently. And we're a part of the central design and cater to all the different groups as needed, but most of our work happens in the consumer-facing app, but still we treat all the groups with the same level of care every time we do motion. So that's basically big part of our mission at Wolt, to have the same experience no matter what Wolt-facing platform you're using. But yeah, next, what is product motion design then? There's, I think, people refer to it with different names like UX motion, or I think someone even calls it interaction design, even though that means a bit different thing totally. But let me tell you what we think about product motion design, what it means to us. So most of all, it's communication. So feedback is an absolute must when you're talking about motion, because if you interact with the UI and it doesn't respond to you in any way, that usually, especially nowadays, it's might even confuse people. I usually think this about how you would talk to a person and it wouldn't reply in any way or give you any kind of feedback that they're listening or anything. That doesn't feel very nice. So feedback gives you an indication that there's actually something happening, and at the same time gives an indication of progress. And of course, motion has to enhance the app's clarity, not reduce it. So that way, I'm not a huge fan of this kind of motion for the sake of motion, doing kind of circus tricks all around the place, because mostly it's motion design job is to take this kind of a choreography of the UI elements to actually help the user to understand what's happening. And at the same time, educating the user how the UI behaves and how the navigation behaves when you interact with the UI. So a big part of that as well. And you might have heard about this perceived latency and performance. So a good motion design can also a little bit play tricks on the user. So when there's some kind of loading happening, or for example, you click something and something needs to load, this simple loader sometimes can make the whole experience feel a little faster when you don't have to just wait for the UI to load something. And navigation is a big part of it, spatial awareness. The user needs to know where they are, how they ended up there, and how do they get back from wherever they are, and how they probably could get back to that screen again in the future if needed. So really helping the user to use the app every time. And of course, grabbing the attention at the right time, very big part of this kind of education as well, telling the user what is happening, like warnings, and these are really important in that we can ping the user like you need to add something to your order to actually, there's some kind of a needed part that needs to be added to the order still to actually that it goes through. And in total, like all of these reduce cognitive load for the user. The old adage of, I think, product design that don't make me think, we help a lot with that. And personality also is a big part of this. Motion is big part of the app's personality, like movement is big part of a user or a person's personality as well, like how people move and talk. We think about it in the same way. And motion team's job is to keep that consistent in our app. So we don't have like silos of engineers or designers doing different kinds of transitions and those. So it would be this kind of a mishmash of everything. So we try to keep it consistent with our own kind of principles that we have behind every thought. And of course, consistency is always comforting because you know how the app behaves when you do something with it. But to me, all of this sums up to peace of mind, because delight is a word that is thrown like at motion design many times, but I think delight can't come when you aren't enjoying using the app in the first place. So I think when you're at peace of mind and enjoying actually and knowing where you are and knowing what you're doing, then the delight comes with that. as a whole experience. Yeah, but now let's check quickly how we use motion in the Wolt app. I'll show you a few examples. So we have a lot of transitions. These are different kind of examples here. So this is a basic kind of not a basic one, but very often seen like scrolling transition. These usually require a lot of this kind of choreography that I mentioned before, because there's a lot of elements and a lot of important timing happening, as you see here, the header appearing at the right time, everything fading out at the right time. So that needs a lot of hierarchy planning there to get it working correctly, and also having the correct assets and animating them in the correct time. And here is a little simpler, like within a component, like a state change transition. I'll show it once more. And here's a more elaborate one that requires a lot more like engineering effort, but we think at these key moments it's actually worth it to go to the trouble of actually doing a little more elaborate transitions. And then these small details are a big thing for us. I always think that divinity lives in the details, so these always like combined together add to the overall experience so much that they are worth it. Like here is a good example of fairly small but very important little interaction. When a user adds in our grocery stores stuff from this quick add picker, it actually jumps the number so you see it from underneath your finger, because these are some things that you don't think if you don't actually test it with your hand and phone, because with the cursor it's a little easier to actually just see everything. And here's a super small detail we have in the app, but these are things we love and think they're actually worth it. It's easy to miss if you scroll fast, but if you even once see that, it's worth it, because this is the where you can see the rest of the categories. The arrow appears with this very nice fluid motion from the side. And here we like doing like common things uncommonly well is one of Wolt's thoughts behind everything. So here, very basic image carousel, but we wanted to have even little details in the like progress indicator there. And then we have a lot of illustrations within the app, which we think are super important and really nice to have here. We usually use them to convey some kind of message. All of these are actually now error messages, but they are more easily acceptable when you get a nice illustration with that. This is one of my favorites, having a double account or trying to do a new with the same information. And here's our professor who's doing lots of stuff within our app and trying and failing horribly most of the time. But yeah, there's a whole lot of more motion goodness happening all through our apps. Actually, some of these aren't even on the consumer-facing app. So we have lots of these kind of illustration in our merchant app and career app as well. So we want everything to be as nice to use as the consumer app. But how we work then, this is like pretty much the triangle we work with, and they communicate with each other, going back and forth, and we live somewhere here in the middle and try to help in any point of this conversation as we can. And when do we join a project? Of course, always as soon as possible, because then we can actually help the most. And there's most time to actually talk with everybody how to take motion into account in the future. But of course, we can help at any time as well. But always best to start doing motion before engineering has started, because sometimes we have had troubles that if engineer has built the component and then motion is added later, they sometimes have to build the component again because it's not ready for motion, and there needs to be changes in the code to actually make it work. So always best to design everything before engineering here as well, like with design too. And what we do, we can help the designers or stakeholders or anyone thinking about the basic flows of the app as well, like interaction design and those, and how you end up from one screen to the other, or just at the motion after design is done. That's fine as well. But we always keep in mind that no motion is always a possibility, because, like I said before, adding motion for the sake of motion isn't nice for anybody. So we always think about it critically if we actually need motion. And one thing also is that we always think if custom motion is needed, because many times like these native patterns are actually better for the user than trying to add any kind of custom motion there. And how we do it, like I said, back and forth with all people included in the project, and sometimes out of the project even if we need something. And one of the biggest parts of our job, of course, is the handoff to developers, because they do the final magic all the time. So we never can forget that. But here is an example how we hand off our file. We have this custom way of doing like motion specking in Figma. And here I can explain a little bit what's happening here. So this is one of the most important parts of our handoff. We always provide a link to a preview video, so the developer can easily check what is supposed to happen in this kind of, from this timeline. We sometimes even provide a like clickable prototype, but we've noticed that it's actually easier to just provide the video so they can go back and forth easily and watch frame by frame. And this is one of the latest additions, but one of the most important one is contact information to the whoever was the motion designer in the project, so we can go back and forth. Sometimes some things which feel really simple in like motion phase could prove to be really hard to implement in code actually. So then we might simplify and achieve pretty similar results, but in a more meaningful way with the engineer. So lots of back and forth in that. Yeah, basically here we color code all of the UI elements. These are a little bit secret, so they're blurred now. Then we match the color codes in the timeline. We put the name of the interaction on top. Here is always the name of the UI element, a property that is being animated, the easing, duration, and delay. And then it forms this nice timeline here. And we use these tokenized easings in our app, so we don't need to provide the numbers for cubic piece here every time. But now actually we get to the dessert part finally a little. So this is the first time I talk about ProtoPie a little as well. So interaction recipes are, of course, the ProtoPie's native way of doing handoff, and they're actually quite powerful, but we still want that our own kind of Figma way of doing things, because we like to have the motion documented next to the design at its own page, so it's easily findable in the future. But I've used this lately a lot because this makes it much faster to actually copy and paste these to the Figma, and I don't need to do any kind of going back and forth and checking values, but just copy pasting here quickly and building the Figma handoff from our own motion components there. And I think in the next update, if I read correctly, we're even getting our own custom easings in ProtoPie, so then our tokenized easings would even read here, so I could even copy paste those, which is really, really awesome. But yeah, ProtoPie at Wolt, how do we use it? Well, basically, we use it mostly for motion design. We have few designers as well who use it, but still mostly used by us. But hopefully there will be more users in the future. But for me, it's the go-to tool for anything outside of Figma. I basically only use ProtoPie. Only for Lotties and those like illustrations that I showed earlier, I used After Effects, but that's a small part of our work. I've used it for over a year now, basically as long as I've worked at Wolt. Very easy to get going. If you have any like experience in motion or prototyping or like developing even, I think programming basics help a lot with the advanced features of ProtoPie. They're easy to pick up then. And overall, I really, really recommend this, like ProtoPie for product motion. They provide so many awesome possibilities to do stuff easily here. And yeah, of course, ProtoPie is high fidelity prototyping tool, but we rarely use it for that yet, as there hasn't been that much need for that currently. But I think it's as useful for smaller tasks. Even I'll show you a bit small example in a while, how small things I even use this for. But yeah, all of the hifi enabling tools are still super useful for basic motion design as well. And why would I use ProtoPie over something else? Of course, like I used to work with After Effects a lot, but testing with an actual phone, of course, is a must for this kind of product motion design, because you can get the correct feeling with mouse and keyboard. You always need to check with your phone and check all the timings and the actual interactions, how they work with when you're actually using your fingers. Like I showed the little quantity picker there, it's not seeable, like noticeable if you wouldn't use your finger actually, that how much you need to pop it out and those things. And a ProtoPie, of course, offers constraints, so you can do any kind of crazy glowy After Effects kind of fractal noise effects here. You're playing with the same things you're playing with in the code. And one of the biggest reasons I use ProtoPie over other like prototyping tools is the cleanliness of the files, because you can achieve a lot within a single screen. You don't need to do this big, huge amount of like screens and doing connections between them and it looking like a big mess. Here you can actually achieve a lot in just one scene. And how you do it actually is here, where I list a little bit of the tools we mostly use for motion in ProtoPie. Formulas are basically like functions in code that you can use within ProtoPie, and they tend to use together with conditionals and variables, where you can actually like use some kind of formula and store it in a variable, use that as a condition and feed it to another variable. Offers a huge like benefit with that kind of positive loops within ProtoPie, so you can automate a lot of the motion there as well to get a real sense of how it works. And chain array triggers are some of my favorites, as you can do a lot of this kind of chaining or doing something with a few values, and you can just perform a lot of motion with a simple one trigger. I show it actually next how it is achieved. Also, send and receive triggers are some of my favorites, as you can do a lot with them with components, because then you can from the main level send to a component and make something happen there, or open something and then from the component send to the main scene. So they talk with each other a lot. I'll show a little bit about that as well in a moment. Live keyboards are very nice for prototyping, saves time and makes it feel more real. So when you are testing with your phone and open like a focus on a text field, it actually opens the phone's own keyboard. So that helps a lot. So you don't need to fake it with some kind of PNG or something that isn't even like interactable. And of course, Lottie files are playable within ProtoPie, which helps a lot with our illustrations and timing other stuff on the UI with them. I'll show you an example in a moment as well. And Figma integration, of course, is a must. Nothing would basically happen without that. So let me show a few examples how I built stuff in ProtoPie. These are fairly simple, but that's what I actually want to convey here, that you can actually achieve quite good results with pretty simple elements. So this little worm thing I showed earlier is actually built only with a single like chain trigger. It's connected to the scroll offset of this image container, and with that a little movement and scaling happening at the right time, it's done. So basically, once I built that system, it was super easy to actually like convey that same system to the developers. And actually in this project, I used only the ProtoPie interaction recipes as a test with the developers, and it worked very well. And here a little bit about Lottie support. So this shows really well that it would have been really hard to time this correctly with some kind of still PNG or SVG of that actual animation here. So here I can actually even like get the timing of the actual time playback time of the Lottie and use that as a condition before jumping to the next scene. So these kind of things wouldn't be possible if we couldn't get this kind of native support there. And of course, range trigger, as I mentioned, is one of my favorites. And why it's my favorite is actually that it provides much better context while doing this kind of motion tests, because here the range trigger is actually connected to the progress bar here. So once it reaches the end, the range trigger recognizes that it's finished, and then it does all the rest of the motion. And I think this provides the proper context for these kind of moments, that you don't actually just tap something and everything happens, but you actually need to do similar amount of work that the user would do before the actual animation would happen. So this is really good for that. And once again, Lottie support, amazing. And yeah, this is fairly simple example, but you can really quickly get to this kind of semi hi-fi level within the app. This is just a quick test I made way back when, but here you can also see the live keyboard, even though I used keyboard on that one, but still on the phone you could use that. But here you can see all of these little elements together make it feel really much like the actual app, even though we're just doing this from a few Figma screens really quickly, and Lottie's and noise playing live there add a lot to the experience, and you get the very good feeling of the actual experience. And I can actually, what this shows is like how simply you can do pretty good stuff. Like this map interaction is here. And with using the phone, actually, it feels like the real thing really easily, and only needs like 5 triggers. And components, as I said, are really powerful. So this shows only a part of the triggers that I used within this component. But now that I've built it, I could just upload it to our interaction library, and anybody could put this as part of their prototype and access it with this kind of message that they can connect to a component. So here it's connected to this, just this open button, but it could be used with anything. So it sends a message to the component, and there it receives the message that something that, or the part that's supposed to open the bottom sheet is clicked. So this is why the send and receive triggers are so powerful, that you can actually then send messages to components from anywhere once you have this component saved in your interaction library. And now, like I said, the amount of work here is you don't ever have to duplicate it again. So it's a huge time saver. This is, of course, an element that's not probably used many times in one app, one prototype, but there's like smaller elements where the time saving is much clearer. And once you start building those, it's of course stacks up. So I highly recommend that. And fast iterations, this is a pretty stupid example, but I still show it because this is actually our web interface now mocked up beautifully in this phone, but let's not talk about that. But here I just wanted to see how quickly it's actually to iterate and test like edge cases in ProtoPie as well, because I built this first 3 stack of in this drop down, and once I got that done, I could easily just duplicate that a few times to talk with the developer about the edge cases, like how scalable that animation is and how the offsets work if you have more stuff there. So fairly simple stuff, but still I highly recommend ProtoPie for this reason. And yeah, I'll show you a little bit of like creative uses, how you can use the off screen in ProtoPie as well, because that's easily forgettable. That's very powerful part of the app as well. So this gray rectangle that is now animating on screen, it would usually be outside of the screen, but here I needed this timeout for this natural timeout for this plus and minus buttons for this row. I didn't want to do any kind of complicated timed opacity or anything like that. So I just, the plus or minus always resets the position of that rectangle. And once it reaches the end, it automatically fades that away. So that way you can easily map these values to, of course, this could move a little less as well. It's only about mapping the correct values there. But this way, I've used this same component in like many rows and it still works the same because the component within itself recognizes the position. It doesn't matter where it's in the scene actually, but very, very useful. And this way you could actually even use some kind of Fox backend or something off screen if you would like to build something like that. But always think about creative uses of using the off screen. And here, like I said before, I use it for everything. Here's like super simple little pulsating dot, but even for this, I exported everything from Figma and animated in ProtoPie because I just like animating stuff in ProtoPie and as well having everything in the same app, always available for other prototypes. But yeah, how are we planning to use ProtoPie in the future? So we're currently forming a design system team where I hope that we will get a possibility to start building this kind of interaction library for all designers. And through that, hope that we can do a lot more of this high fidelity prototyping and testing, even in like discovery phase where you're just testing things out, but there you can then build quickly this kind of tests that actually prove much better if we're going to the right direction. And I think it's very future proof for us in that we are still using pretty basic parts of the like ProtoPie's potential, because I really enjoy that there's the possibility of like voice interaction or these kinds of things that you probably can use in the future. And of course, strengthening numbers. Once we get more designers on board, we'll probably get more jobs in ProtoPie as well, and we can do more high fidelity prototypes there, and even user testing, which is now possible in ProtoPie as well. But basically, that's it. Thank you all. And hopefully you got something sensible out of my morning ramblings from Finland. And hey, feel free to connect me in LinkedIn and ask any questions there. But of course, we have a Q&A coming, so ask there as well. But later, you can connect me anytime you want. No worries. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Samu, for this amazing presentation. I personally enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and some people were telling in the comments that this presentation made them hungry. Well, I could have added a disclaimer at the beginning. Even if your stomachs might be hungry, I hope your brains are packed with
if
a
you're
lot of
in our countries, Wolt like gets food to you quickly.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay, then let's head over to the chat, to the Q&A, sorry, to try to answer some of the questions. So the way we will do this is I will read some of the questions out loud, and then Samu will try to answer your questions. I will start from the top. Let's see. Yeah, we are in time. The first question is, whether do you keep a motion design system inside ProtoPie? Samu, you mentioned something about design systems at the end.
Yeah, currently we don't have anything within ProtoPie, but hopefully in the future we would have something. But currently we're documenting mostly those motion specs in Figma, and trying to document also some of the principles in our Confluence. So some thoughts behind that. Of course, we're quite a small team currently, so it's easy to communicate, but future-proofing our work, we're hopefully getting some kind of more elaborate system. ProtoPie could be that, like I mentioned in the future of ProtoPie in Wolt part, that hopefully in the design system phase, we will start building this kind of interaction library, which could be basically a motion design system inside there.
Thank you, Samu. I hope this answers your question. The next question is related to like adopting ProtoPie in your team. How was that whole process of introducing ProtoPie, getting your team on board, your stakeholders on board?
Well, I think it's fairly easy because people are, of course, doing a lot of prototyping nowadays, even like product designers testing their designs quickly. So when you can like provide these examples of ProtoPie and how good it is and how well it works, it's easy to get people on board. Like I hadn't done any prototyping last year when Masha actually introduced me to ProtoPie, and once I tested it, was clear that I liked it more than the other prototyping software I tried. So I think it's so easy to pick up and really clear like the UI and how things connect. So I think it's always easy, but still hoping to attract more people from our company to use it as well. They're here, so I think most of them or some of them. So
I think
use
you did a
ProtoPie.
great job on that. Thank you so much. Okay, we do have a lot of questions, so I will try to kind of pick. Okay, let's see. Who does the illustrations? So Jordan is asking, who does the illustrations? Is that
we
you?
have-
Or do you work with the graphic designer?
Actually, we have an illustrator we work with sometimes, but some of them we do ourselves as well. So me and Masha have done a few of them as well ourselves because we have these principles behind the illustration styles and those, and we can copy some elements from the older illustration as well sometimes, but most of the time we can start from scratch and know the style, so we can imitate that a little bit, but most of the time we try to work with the actual illustrator program. Of course, that's best for us and not our actual job, so he's much better at it. So
Okay.
hopefully that answers the.
Yeah, I think that pretty much covered it. All right.
I could actually, if okay, I could answer one question I see here because I forgot to mention it in the presentation. During the handoff, I was supposed to mention that why we use our custom way of handoff is because we use 5 different coding languages, because somebody asked, do we use a React Native or native app? Because we use 5 different languages all through our apps. We have like native iOS, native Android, we use React for web, then we use Flutter for these merchant apps. Now I have one finger left, but I don't remember what I'm supposed to say next. But at least we have lots of languages to sum it up. Okay, sorry.
Right. We did have a lot of questions regarding handoff. So I think that pretty much covered it, and also you included some information in your presentation. So once we share the recording, please go back to that and watch the section dedicated to handoff and yeah, working with engineers. Okay, then. Thank you, Samu. Let's see. Jimmy is asking, do you also have UX metrics set up for motion in the app to validate that it's worth the investment?
Actually, this is something that we've discussed, especially within motion team, but we're still like not sure about the telemetry events we would have to put there. So we would get like a meaningful data of that. We have very good data team within Wolt, but we haven't discussed them with that yet because we still need to come up with some kind of metrics ourselves, what we would like to measure, because it's quite hard to measure the like with this kind of telemetry data, the benefits of motion. I think you can get more info about that with good user testing, I would say.
Got it. And also related to motion, Brima Freeman is asking whether you use libraries. So what libraries do Wolt engineers use for creating the motion framework?
I think not entirely sure about all of them. I know that our web developers use Framer Motion, and we actually talked with them a lot about it lately. But there's, I think, lots of like the native apps have a lot of like native libraries in use, and they use the native way of doing the motion, and we provide the specs and those cubic Bezier like cubic Bezier easings there, so they use them, and we try to keep usually the properties in check, so we use mostly scale, position, rotation, and like opacity, so that way we don't need that kind of elaborate framework or libraries to do the motion. But I think the Framer Motion is actually, at least is in use, and I can say that for a fact. Yeah.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Prima, I hope that pretty much clarifies that for you. Okay, so we have a question from Walid. It's a bit long, so maybe Samu, you can also read it while I read it out loud. Okay, so basically his question is, have you worked on a kiosk previously? If yes, then what are the standards to keep in the list while creating the interactions for kiosk screens for self-ordering?
Not entirely sure, could be that I don't know the term, but because I'm fairly new to the kind of tech field. So I'm not sure if I know that term, so I'm not sure if I can answer that any
I think he's
meaningful
referring to
way.
the kiosk for self-order. Whether I don't know if you have any experience maybe doing that. So basically, yeah,
No,
yeah. Okay, Walid, but I do know
I
we
haven't.
have, yeah.
Yeah.
If someone from my team can share, I know we have a demo, we have a prototype with kiosks. So maybe you can share, Fredo or Rebecca, maybe you can share that. So maybe Walid can refer to that because I know we did a kiosk demo / prototypes at some point. So yeah, Walid, please wait for that. Okay, then let's see. So documentation, I think we pretty much covered that. Okay. Matt Harney is asking, while I completely agree that motion design hugely enhances a UX, how do you balance the scope or cost of adding these features and interactions to your product?
Yeah, that's something that why we want to be involved early on in the project, so we can actually do this kind of scoping of the project if it's meaningful or we have enough time to add motion there. But it's actually treated very well in our company, and they like the higher ups, even most of them understand the value we get from motion, and that's something we really feel that separates us from the rest as well, that the overall feeling is really good in our app. So we don't try to get these kind of specific metrics, I think, but of course, always we do this kind of a timeline of the project, and the developers have to check if we have time to actually implement this. So I don't know how to answer this, like to answer all the possible situations, but I would think that it's more dependent on like how important the feature itself is. If it's like something really small somewhere, there's probably no need to, if it's like a important or quick project, no need to do any kind of elaborate motion there probably. But if we are doing something like big, let's say something very major like the order tracking or ordering or venue experience or something like that, there we know that it's so used so much that it's worth the time there. And we have really excited and skilled developers doing this kind of motion. So many of our like consumer side developers especially, they have done a lot of this work and they're quite fast at it nowadays. We've got data, and actually Masha had a questionnaire with our developers, and some of them said like something that used to take them like 3 days, they do it in under a day nowadays because they're so used to this way of working. And so it gets faster and cheaper at the same time.
Okay, I like that answer. That pretty much clarifies that for me.
Yeah, sorry for going here and there.
No, it's
a little
fine.
bit.
It makes total sense. We understand perfectly. Okay, then. So Matt is asking whether you use ProtoPie to create this amazing presentation, Samu.
Yeah, actually it was completely made in ProtoPie, so forgot to mention that as well. But yeah, that's something you can use it for too.
Yay,
You get a lot of interactivity with that.
amazing. Okay, someone is asking, what are your delivery app references to create such a good job? Like where do you get your inspiration from, basically?
I can't probably talk like from the product designer's point of view. I can talk from, but for us, of course, we mostly use these kind of basic motion principles that are, of course, best practices for UIs, but we also have our own principles within Wolt, like how we want the app to feel, what kind of motion is it, because some other app would probably use different kinds of motion. We are pretty playful, and that some more serious app wouldn't do that. So we always, of course, have these principles in mind, but still sometimes if you're doing like a specific kind of interaction or specific kind of motion, I usually just go around and reference all kinds of apps. I have lots of apps in my phone that I use many times for referencing, but I think from advertising, I learned that, and I still use the same principle here, that I don't reference that much from the same industry, because I don't think that's very good idea to just stick with the same industry and getting the same kind of solutions from there, but actually thinking outside of your own field and finding new ways to do things, and of course avoiding to doing things too similarly to competition even. But I think we have various ways of like benchmarking with designers and people like stakeholders of those, but I can't talk for them here that much.
Yeah.
How they
Yeah.
work, but that's how I do it.
It's a whole process. Are all your animations Lotties, or do you use other things like Rive?
Currently all of them are Lotties, but we've looked into Rive a lot. Currently we have few developers even checking how that would be possible, but still our principle is that it's either or, so we don't want to use both of them, but we want to stick with one to keep it more easily manageable. But Rive is super interesting, I can say that.
Leroy is asking, and also I'm curious to hear the answer to this. You mentioned in How We Work that no motion is a possibility as well. How do you decide which designs to animate versus what not to animate?
I think we come to the basics of design, that design is basically communication. So you're thinking about what do you want to communicate, and is it meaningful to have the motion there, or is it more understandable for the user to actually not have motion? So if the motion is more like distracting and not this kind of guiding element, then we always think it's best to just not use motion and not spend anyone's time to actually implement the motion or even have it there if it confuses the user. So that's done by case. I really can't provide any kind of a definite answer when to use it and when not to use it. So that comes to the basics of design, communication and decision making on the design tables.
Got it. In your opinion, Samu, what it would be the difference between a motion designer and an interaction designer?
This is a hard question actually, because there's, I think, a lot of interpretations about this thing. But as I've understood it, interaction designer is actually a much more higher level designer there. So they're thinking about the whole app or web experience, how it feels, how things relate to each other. So I think that could be something a product designer, UX designer, and motion designer combined, and even adding to that as well. I think that's a little bit older title even. It's nowadays easily confused with motion design. People actually use that title for them, even though they are like motion designers more. But I think, as I've understood from the history of web design and product design, it's actually very like big role from the start when you're starting to scope things in a project. But not entirely sure. Titles are always hard.
Right. It's very subjective. It's at your own interpretation at the end of the day, right? All these concepts. Thank you. Can you share a little bit about how you do like testing QA for the motion interactions at Wolt in the app?
You mean in design phase or in the actual engineer phase? But not sure, but I can answer both a little bit. Sorry, voice is going. But for our own like design phase, we of course ask from people, and within the team we're trying to do as good a decision as we can, and sometimes even ask outside of the team, like, does this work, does this make sense? And of course we are doing user testing many times, so there we might get some kind of data, what works, what doesn't. And Q&A, I think we have good Q&A team happening on the like engineering phase as well, so they're actually also checking if everything works, but I don't know if it's like specifically for motion anytime. So it's such a natural part of the whole. So they're just communicated within other kind of Q&A tickets. So sorry, not Q&A, but QA tickets. So it's just a natural part of our company everywhere. So we get feedback the similar way we get from any other functionality in the app, I would say, like design or engineering.
Thank you. Thank you,
Hopefully
Samu.
that makes sense.
Makes sense to me.
Good.
Okay, let's see. We still have a few more minutes, so I will try to squeeze in a few more questions. So we answer this about QA. Let's see. Okay, what are your thoughts on combining 2D and 3D graphics in the app?
It's a current discussion within our company. We're not have any definitive answers of that, but we still feel like the 2D graphics with this kind of illustration and motion, we don't use that much 3D yet, at least as a moving part, because of course that provide is quite difficult actually to implement sometimes. We have actually a little bit of live 3D within our app hidden somewhere. I won't spoil that because it's a little bit of an Easter egg there, but we have completely made experience like basically a game where you can use live 3D. So we have some kind of implementation test happening with live 3D, and hopefully we could use that a little more in the future. But still, we think that the 2D illustrations, while they're animated and moving, are still really worth it. But we'll see what the future holds, basically.
That makes sense. And I wanted to kind of keep this question for the end. So
Yep.
someone is asking, in your opinion, what would be the future of motion design? It's a bit more like a philosophical question.
Yeah, that's actually a good question, but really hard to imagine yet. But let's say, of course, there's lots of possibilities coming all the time, and the processing power is getting more and more powerful on even basic phones, so you can add this kind of live 3D or those. But I think it's, you never know, these VR and AR stuff that's happening all around, or if those are like in the future the most common way of interacting with apps or something, you never know. So what if there's this rumored Apple glasses coming that you have an AR experience with in front of your eyes, what kind of motion does that use and what kind of UI design that does have. So I think motion design is very tied to the future of product design and UI design as well. So but I think there's still more and more need for this. People are very used to actually this kind of interactive, very lively and moving apps. So I think if you are completely like still and don't have any kind of liveliness to your app, you are falling behind nowadays, to be perfectly honest. People expect the UI to give feedback to you in the sense of motion.
Thank you. Thank you, Samu. I think we have to wrap up the Q&A session here because we are quickly approaching the top of the hour. There are still some questions unanswered, but thank you, Samu, for providing all these amazing answers and for this lesson into motion design and prototyping. If you have any questions left unanswered, you can just look up for Samu Rintala on LinkedIn, and I think he also mentioned that he's willing to connect with you guys.
Yeah, feel free to. I'll accept it.
Amazing. Right then. Okay, so yeah, like always, we share a discount code in these webinars for all those who attend as a token of appreciation for your time and dedication for taking part in these webinars. Rebecca or Fredo or someone from my team will drop this code in the chat so you can take it. Right. Well, the webinar kind of schedule is ongoing for this year. We have a lot of webinars coming up. The next webinar is with Vivint, where we will talk about prototyping for the connected home. So it's a webinar about prototyping for IoT. We will talk about it's going to be a very in-depth presentation about ProtoPie's camera features. So make sure to register today. It's free. You have it then added to your calendar, so you will not miss it in July. And yeah, make sure to join our Proto Pioneers community. It's free. You can get help from there. You can connect with other ProtoPioneers, ProtoPie users, or just designers in general. And make sure to check out our Bento profile for all our socials, or our links are in there. So yeah, check it out. And let's stay connected, everyone. Okay. Thank you, Samu, for your amazing presentation. Thank you, Rebecca, for the introduction to the world of ProtoPie. And thank you, thank you, my team, for always having my back, for always supporting me. And I hope to see you at our next webinar with ProtoPie and our next guest speaker, Vivint. Thank you, Samu. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Rebecca.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. So great.
I will let the webinar open so you can retrieve all your links, your codes and whatnot. So yeah, I'll see you at the next one. Bye-bye.